Okay, great. I think we'll get started, and then if anyone else joins us, then they can join in a second. My name's Abby. I'm the current vice chair for BUSA. I was also the development officer a couple of years ago, and kind of for the last 2 or 3 years, I've worked quite closely with our development officers on this kind of area. So thank you very much for coming. We've got, I guess, it would be great if you can stick in the chat actually kind of which unis you're from. So, and if you're like a social sailing captain or a development captain, that would be quite useful for us to know, just so we know who we're talking to. And yeah, basically this won't last long. I'm kind of expecting it to be maybe half an hour, but just hoping that it's going to give you a kind of little bit of an insight into what BUSA can do to help you in your role this year, whether that's as a social sailing captain or maybe you have another role on a committee. And we're going to try and cover kind of 3 areas. So the first one is around this kind of start of term, engaging new sailors, how you attract them and getting them keen for the season ahead. The second one, we're going to hear from some people from the University of Birmingham who have a really good development squad offering. So they're just going to talk briefly around kind of why they've got a development squad, how they run it, and some tips for success. So if you're looking to implement something similar in your club, or you've got a similar offer and you just want to hear how someone else is doing it, that should be quite useful. And then the final one is around how the kind of this celebrating success model, I guess. So we're going to hear a bit about how some universities in the last year or so have started to implement this kind of events for social sailors model and what we hope that might look like in the future. I'm just going to check we are recording, which we are. Thank you very much, Karen, probably for doing that. Okay, so let's move on to the kind of first slide. So I guess the first thing from our point of view, just quickly around Zoom house rules. I'm sure everyone's doing this already. We're all pretty used to this whole online stuff, but if you can make sure you're muted when you're not talking, that would be great. Up to you if you want your camera on or not. We're not going to force you if you have a question. If you do have a question, please put it in the chat at any point. We've also got some section for questions at the end. And just in general, our email address and social media is at the bottom of every single slide. So if you do have any questions or you've got something you want to ask but you don't want to ask it now, feel free to ping us an email or send us a message on any of our channels. So just to kind of set a little bit of context for why we've started, I guess, doing a bit more work in this area. In 2018-19, any of you that are kind of older students, I guess, might remember this. We did a big sailor survey. So we got almost 200 responses from student sailors across the country, every single region. And a massive theme that came out of that was BUSA does absolutely nothing for beginners. So I've highlighted some of my all-time favorite quotes from this survey here with some nice little red arrows, just so you've got an idea of the kind of comments we received, which was basically, we don't know what BUSA does other than run the BUCS events. They do stuff for team racing, but we don't see what we get from it as a club in terms of any other sailors that aren't team racers. And there was this really kind of like desire came out of that for a bit more support around general club development, getting beginners engaged and that kind of stuff. And you can see from this graph on the right hand side that actually probably the biggest things that came out as people wanted to see more of from BUSA was learn to sail initiatives, and then sort of coaching in each of the disciplines. So development for team racing, yachting and match racing. So that's kind of where it came from. We were faced with this sort of, no one really knows what we do. We don't do a lot for beginners. How can we improve that? So from that last year, our development officer, Joe Penhall-Smith, some of you might know him, put together this resource document. So if you haven't seen our like guide to social sailing, it's on our website. But again, please send us an email and we can pass that on to you. We kind of looked at kind of collating some good examples of social sailing from across the country. So we had case studies from Birmingham, funnily enough, but also from another couple of universities as to how they approach social sailing and kind of tips they'd give to other clubs looking to improve their offer. And we came up with this kind of 5-step model. So starting on how you can kind of engage beginners, moving on to actually how do you teach them, can you give them RYA qualifications, and then what do you do with them after that? So yeah, this kind of engage, learn, practice, celebrate, and then progression, which was the key thing. So this year we have a new development officer. Her name is Iona. If you want to get in touch with Iona and you have any questions, again, you can send us an email on the general committee email address and she'll get back to you. So kind of following that and moving into this year, we really tried to make social sailing part of our offer. And you probably won't be aware, but in the last few months, kind of over lockdown, we've done quite a bit of work around looking at BUSA's offer and trying to come up with a bit of a strategy for future years. So this picture in the middle is around kind of what we call the sailor pathway. So these bubbles is everything that BUSA currently offers in green. And you can see there's quite a lot at the top here. So all of the BUCS championships, the team racing qualifiers, the tour, for example. However, in the middle, this kind of development and progression level is very orange, which means we don't do anything here, but it's a big area of opportunity that we could actually do to support sailors a bit more. So hence, part of our strategy really focuses on this middle bit, and the strategy falls under 5 areas. Again, this is on our website, and I'm not going to obviously bore you with it now, but just so you are aware of those sort of 5 areas. We have learn, celebrate, and develop, which are both, well, all 3 of them are aimed at beginners and kind of non-racers within your club. So we have targets for BUSA over the next 10 years revolving around supporting people to get qualifications and learn to sail, supporting people to actually engage their social sailors and celebrate their progress, and then also plans around trying to do more to take those social sailors that want to become racers and helping clubs bridge that gap between their social sailors and their race teams. So that's just a little bit around the background. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about attracting new sailors. So I'm going to stop talking, and Karen, our chair, is going to have a little chat about this. She's been a social sailing captain, did a lot of work with Bangor in kind of developing their club in her time. So this is an area she can speak a lot about.
Cool. So yeah, I guess I've just had a think about a few different strategies I know I've used, both at kind of small universities like Bangor and also here at Cambridge, because I think there are some things which are similar, some things which are a little bit different. So especially in the times of COVID, content is really important. But then I've also said, think of key times through the year. So everybody thinks, okay, Freshers Fair, we'll put content out, we'll try and attract sailors then. But actually, maybe there are other times in the year. Most unis have a kind of refresher after January. People who might not have got involved straight away might be having a look to see if they can do anything. And then also thinking, are you offering kind of courses or different activities for those sailors if they were going to join not at the start of the year? These are little things which it's just worth thinking about. So making sure what you're offering, like what Abby was talking about, that kind of continues throughout the year and is not all focused on the start of the year. Could you please click, Abby? Yeah, so word of mouth, and this kind of goes on from what I was saying. So I found here at Cambridge, we had a group of probably 12 people who wanted to do RYA levels to start with. Great, they got their levels and they didn't really come back. In exam term for us, I asked team sailors and I myself just chatted to friends who actually were really interested in giving it a go. And it's a really good way of getting money into your club if you're charging a little bit for social sailors to come and give it a go in the warmer months. And I think this is more important with the group of sailors and the group of individuals we're thinking about here. Quite a few of them are just not going to be that keen to go sailing in December, especially if they don't have their own kit. So the Easter term is actually a really good time to focus on social sailing when most of the events are over, as long as you have people willing to kind of support those sessions. And then the other one is what you're offering. So we've mentioned it before. Qualifications, Birmingham, the host club is a training centre, which is really useful and is now an ASF site, as it turns out. So Andrew Simpson Foundation Trust, we work with them closely, and they have sites all over the UK. Abby's going to speak about it in a little bit, but we offer discounts. So if, for example, you have a group of sailors who are really interested in becoming dinghy instructors, or first years who you then want in the next 2-3 years to kind of head up your committee, it's a really good opportunity to get those qualifications for a little bit cheaper. And I think there's one more, maybe. Yeah, so that kind of just summarizes it, that it all comes down to value for money. I would suggest just put yourself in the shoes of someone who's coming to university. They've never sailed before. What actually is your club offering them? So for example, the content, if in Freshers Fair in the first few weeks, all you're showing is team racing photos from events, is that going to be attracting social sailors? And then again through the year, if you're just showing reports of team racing events, again, are new social sailors really going to want to join? So it's just, yeah, I think my main points are really think about what you're putting out, not just at the start of the year, all the way through the year, and then just think outside the box a little bit. For example, like I said, at Cambridge, I probably invited like 15 of my friends over that term, and it works really well, and some of them now have continued to go sailing. Yeah, I think that's all. Go ahead, Abby.
Great, thank you very much. So that's kind of, I guess, quite a good chat around how you attract new people. And of course, we know that every single club is different. You're all going to have your own kind of recognised freshers fairs and sports bazaars potentially, and ways that you do this. The purpose of this webinar is just to kind of share what some other clubs have done and maybe give you some ideas. If you've got things that maybe aren't working quite so well, these are some ideas where you could potentially change that. So Karen mentioned it briefly there around RYA training. So most of the host clubs that universities sail at, we know, are recognised RYA training centres. So we'd always say, if you're not already able to offer RYA qualifications to the students in your club, go to your host club first, yeah, because it's most likely that they're going to be able to do that. And to be entirely honest, it's often the cheapest and easiest way to do things. A lot of volunteer-run clubs charge like really nominal fees for courses. It's literally pretty much covering the cost of the safety boat fuel. So if you speak to your host club, see if potentially they've got some instructors that might be willing to help run a course for you, whether that's like an RYA level 1 or potentially some more high levels, so a level 2, or modules like sailing with spinnakers, things like that. These are all good ways to kind of really develop your social sailors skills and basically give them something to work towards and encourage them to keep coming back. If you are going to your host club to offer RYA training, the key thing to think about is what are you offering them in return. So especially if it is a volunteer run club where training courses are very cheap, a lot of the time they will want something back from you in order to do that. So potentially you might have members in the club already who are instructors. A lot of students work as sailing instructors over the holidays. So I'd hope that a lot of your clubs potentially will already have some instructors. If you don't have instructors, think about how else you could offer to help the host club. Like, could you potentially, have you got people with PB2s that can sit on safety boats and help run the safety cover, or even just kind of offering to help with like launching and that kind of stuff, that like offers of help go a long way in volunteer run clubs. So I guess if you don't have members that are instructors, or potentially you've got people that could be but haven't quite got the qualification, because we're aware they're pretty expensive to go and do your dinghy instructor qualifications, that's something we're looking to support. So when you start to look a bit further afield, commercial training centres obviously tend to run instructor courses on quite a regular basis. The only issue is it's generally a lot more expensive than a volunteer run club. So as Karen mentioned, we're trying to sort of do our best to help make RYA training a little bit more accessible for students. And the first thing we've done towards that is to have a training partnership with the Andrew Simpson Foundation. So they have 4 centres in the UK. At the moment, that's Portland, Portsmouth, Reading and Birmingham. Now, obviously, we're aware that's quite southern. So if you're in Scotland or the north, this probably isn't going to help you very much. However, if you do know of commercial training centres near you, it's always worth having a chat with them. If you've got, say, a group of 6 students that all want to do their start racing qualification, and you can say to a commercial centre, there's 6 of us, what price can you give us? A lot of them, I imagine, will be quite receptive to giving you a bit of a group discount. And that's exactly the case with the Andrew Simpson Foundation. So anyone that is a member of a BUSA club, and please do take this back to your clubs and share it with the members there, anyone gets a 10% discount on anything that you're booking. So whether that's a sailing course, an instructor course, a race coach level 2, a powerboat qualification, most of the centres run windsurfing as well. So if you're looking to do any windsurfing training, 10% on any course that they're running. All you have to do basically is use the discount codes that I've put on the slide here. I will email these around again afterwards, but basically BUSA, in fact that's wrong, BUSA ASF discount, that should be 10 for individuals, And then if you've got a group of sailors from your uni, if there's 6 to 12 of you, you get 15% off. And if you can get 12 or more, firstly, good going for getting 12 or more wanting to do a course, but you can also then get 20% off. So well worth looking at. We are aware it's very southern. So if you do have centres near you, I was in talks with Manchester about a year ago around a centre in Manchester. If you've got a centre near you and you think it would be great if they give us a student discount, do send us an email and we're more than happy to kind of open those conversations with them. This deal we've got with the ASF is by no means exclusive. So if there are other centres and we can talk to them about student discounts, we are very happy to do that. Okay, so next up, we've kind of spoken now about you've got your sailors, they can now sail, hopefully, or pretty much sail. The kind of next bit is what do you do with them now? And this is where some universities have really sort of strong offers in this. So the next thing is around Birmingham. So I'm not sure who from Birmingham is on the call and wishes to lead this, but if you guys would like to go next, that would be great.
Hi. So there's a few reasons why we have a dev squad. The first one is it's a great way for us to naturally progress sailors who have been involved with the RYA levels and sort of get them involved with racing. And then it's also a good opportunity for our non-team sailors to learn the basics of team racing. And particularly if they're looking to join a team in maybe next year or the year after. And we've had successes with this in the past where we have actually taken members from our dev squad and we've taken them to events when, say, a member of the team's dropped out for illness or just dropped out of sailing or whatever. It also offers a great opportunity for our new team members, particularly freshers, gives them extra time on the water, and it allows them to get a better grasp of the basics of team racing, which can sometimes get disappeared in team training. And then later in the year, it's a good way to sort of encourage them to help with coaching, because coaching always helps them sort of understand team racing better once they have to teach it to someone else. I think Matt's here to talk a bit about how we run Dev Squad, and then Helen will talk a little bit about her experience as a social sailor and then someone on Dev Squad.
Yeah, so one of the main things that we struggled with was trying to get teaching for people. So obviously we have some instructors, but we prioritize them being on the courses. So we then make like a timetable from people with team, which allows us to keep like the standard up and also the social interactions, because we don't have enough boats to be able to sail the dev squad, beginners and team at the same time. We have Wednesday sailing for beginners and development squad, and then team sail at the weekend. But development squad is a really nice sort of place where potentially towards the end of the year, the beginners and team all interact together. So the way that we make it a success is essentially by integrating it as part of our team and beginner, like between the two. And making sure that there's like links. We also swap helm and crew quite regularly. And then a good way of also finding people to run it is the way that they ran it before we took, well, before recently we had a system where before the freshers, as the freshers were coming in, we sort of looked at people that would be team captain in 2 years' time potentially. And then the people that were then going to be lined up for that were chosen to, well, highlighted as potential dev squad candidates, so that they had a year sort of in training before team. But yeah, essentially it's just trying to get as many people involved as possible. It's a good way of transitioning between beginner and team. Yeah, I think Helen is now going to talk about a bit about her experiences on dev squad.
Yeah, it's just quite a nice little story of I did sailing a couple of times at school through a charity and rocked up to sailing club having never done dinghy sailing, got my level 1 and 2 and just managed to get a bit too involved in sailing for my skill level, and been really lucky to go to uni that kind of let me learn. So I think another really nice part of Wednesday sailing, because we run social sailing and dev squad alongside each other initially, when you get that inevitable like people drop out for the cold, you end up with a very nice mix of people. Like you'll get a couple team sailors, a couple dev squad and a couple of social sailors all coming and just dicking around or maybe doing some team racing. And I think that's quite a nice factor, because it meant that when I was barely able to float, I'd actually end up doing team racing some random weeks and kind of being like, actually, I do want to reach this level. And I'll, like, you can see people very close up in action. So yeah, I'll keep it short, but I think what's been really successful at Birmingham is just getting people involved and keeping them that way, because there's always somewhere for people to go once they've reached a point. That's it.
Great, thank you very much, guys. That was excellent. Does anyone on the call just have any questions for Birmingham while we're kind of there, in terms of, like, obviously they've explained kind of the days they run it and how they mix the group, but if anyone's got a question, if you want to kind of stick it in the chat, or do speak up if you would rather just speak up. No? Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks very much, guys, for your time. That was really useful. And we'll have some questions at the end, so potentially if you think of one later, stick it in then. So then I guess kind of just the third section that we're going to talk about briefly is around this kind of model of celebrating the success of your social sailors. So what we tend to see with a lot of clubs is people come to us with the same kind of questions and problems, in that they had a group at the beginning of term who were really keen, like freshers looking for a new activity, came to the taster day, great. They had a good kind of 15, 20 that bought memberships from that, but then as it gets cold, as it gets to the winter, they don't want to go sailing anymore in their kind of borrowed wetsuits and waterproof tops. And then by the time you get to kind of March, April, and the weather starts getting nicer, there's no social sailors left to be seen. So this is really something that a few universities have started kind of trying to address through this model of really trying to like celebrate the success of their social sailors and give them something to work towards over the winter. Now, as far as we're aware, there were 2 examples of this in the last kind of couple of years. The first one was a kind of start of the year social sailing event model. So last year, Manchester ran an event called the Manchester Challenge, which was supported by our BUSA Development Fund. And that was very much started as an event that they did, which was usually just Manchester only. So they would get all their social sailors down to West Kirby at a weekend near the start of term and really kind of do a day of sort of training, introduction to team racing, and then have a social in the evening where they invited the rest of their club there as a kind of a club integration model. Now, when Manchester came to us last year looking for funding for this, we were happy to support it, but one of the contingencies on that was, actually, have you thought about opening this to other universities in your region? So last year they did open it, and they had some sailors from Liverpool came and joined them, and as well from Loughborough. So it provided this kind of joint university approach where sailors could meet people from other teams, and actually gave them a bit of that experience of going away to an event and representing their university that the team racers get, but they don't necessarily get. So that was very much a kind of start of the term model. The second model that we're aware of, which was my university until the end of this year, but Loughborough run an event called the Loughborough Luff Up, started a couple of years ago, and that was very much aiming to do the same thing in the Midlands region. So it's giving their social sailors and also other social sailors in the region that incentive to keep sailing throughout the winter, keep improving their skills, to actually say to them, look, we've got this event happening in the spring. It happens usually in kind of March, April, May time, just before exams. This is a great opportunity for you to kind of showcase what you've learned and go and, you know, visit other unis. So it's introducing them to sailing at a different venue, something that a lot of social sailors don't ever get to do. Part of it's a bit of a development drive. So they kind of, in terms of the activities they do at the event, there's things like fleet racing, but also an introduction to team racing. And if you can get some of the race team sailors along to do a bit of coaching, actually a lot of the feedback we got was that social sailors actually really enjoyed that introduction to team racing, and it made them consider going to trials next year. I think a lot of people look at their social sailors and think, oh, these people don't want to race. They're just here to, you know, have a good time and go to the pub afterwards. And that is true for some of them. Not everyone wants to race, but equally there are others who think, oh, I couldn't possibly try out for the race team. I'm nowhere near good enough. And actually by doing kind of what Birmingham were talking about and this kind of stuff, where you're actually trying to integrate people a bit more, that means that you're kind of saying to them, it's not that hard. We need crews, you know, even if it's for our third team next year, come to trials, see how you get on. And I guess the biggest thing of any inter-university event is the social. So as an example, at the Loughborough Luff Up, we kind of did a day of sailing on the Saturday, followed it with a barbecue at the club that you can see in this picture here. So that gave the sailors from all the Midlands unis kind of a chance to mingle, I guess, talk to each other. And then in the evening, we held a kind of punch party. Again, there was a bit of enforced socialisation going on, where we ran a kind of punch pong tournament between the unis, but actually it's quite a good way to break down those barriers between people that don't know each other, and made sure everyone had a really, really good time. Also quite a good earner for the club. So if your club runs a team racing event but doesn't really do much after qualifiers, this is a great way of putting something in your calendar nearer the end of term if you can kind of negotiate the exam date issue. And yeah, it would be great to see more of these next year. So if your club is interested in this kind of regional social sailing event model at all, or even if you're just, you know, you'd like to learn more, you'd like to know, you know, which unis in your region are running these events and how can you take your social sailors with, you know, get them going to those events, do let us know. Like, send us a message, send us an email, and I'd be more than happy to have a chat with you in a bit more depth about this. We also did a bit of kind of survey work after the first one of these events. So I surveyed all of the Midlands social sailing captains last year. So if you were involved in 2019-20, you might be aware of this already in the Midlands, but we got kind of 20 responses from social sailors and social sailing captains, not loads, but of those 20 odd, 100% of them were either a definite yes, the blue bubble in that pie chart, a definite yes, but for a kind of less competitive event is the red one, or they were a maybe. So it's quite clear that actually this social sailors want to get out of the club what the racers get out of it. And if you can say to them, we've got this event, you can go to the event, keep it as low cost as possible. I think we charge £20 a person for the day, the barbecue and the social in the evening. And that's a really good incentive to keep people engaged. Okay. So I guess the kind of final thing is, does anyone have any questions? I've got a few that have come in earlier through the Instagram Q&A. So if you've got any, do you want to stick them in the chat? In the meantime, I'll just go through a couple that we've had already. So obviously, unsurprisingly, in the current climate, COVID is featuring a lot on people's minds, and I guess it makes things a little bit more challenging. So a couple of the questions we got both kind of linked to that. And the first one is around, how should our taster session be running with the current guidelines? Now, I don't really know where you guys are at in terms of your terms, whether you're like a later start or you started already, but we're aware that a number of clubs have already run taster sessions successfully. So the key thing, I guess, from our perspective, which if you came to our start of term and COVID webinar, this will be almost repeating ourselves, but really it's just about following guidance. And there's three main guidances that we kind of would recommend you follow. First and foremost, your university. So we know that some universities are being far more strict than others, so you need to know where your uni and your students' union stands. Are they happy for you to be running activity or not? That's kind of the number one question. The second one is about your host sailing club. So again, different clubs have different facilities, different kind of restrictions in place. So make sure you're aware of those. You've had a chat with the committee at your host club. They know what you're planning and they're happy for that to go ahead. And then finally, the RYA obviously have guidance that I'm sure you might be familiar with, which involves kind of mitigations, such as if you're sailing in mixed households and 2 meter social distancing isn't possible, which realistically in a dinghy probably isn't going to be possible unless you happen to have access to really big ones. Make sure people are wearing masks. I've seen on a lot of people's social media recently kind of the restrictions they're putting in place for their tasters, and a lot of them are saying bring 2 masks, so you've got one to wear on the water, and then if that gets wet you've got another one to wear on the land. And yeah, so that's basically follow that guidance. If you do want more tips, or your committee is still unsure about anything COVID related, I'd recommend you have a look at our COVID webinar that we ran a couple of weeks ago. That's available on our YouTube, and we had representatives there from the RYA racing department. We had Keith from K-Sail, and a number of other people who kind of had some good questions in this area, but also a lot of expertise, so they can give you a much better answer than I can, basically. And then kind of the second question that was linking to that was around RYA training. A lot of commercial centres are back open and running training courses, but you might find that your host club is not yet running RYA training from kind of the general picture across the country. So if you've got social sailors who want to do a level 1 course, but it's potentially going to be more challenging because of COVID, you're going to have to look at kind of, I guess, alternatives. So first and foremost, can you run a single-handed dinghy course? Maybe your club has access to picos or toppers that you could use for that. that's obviously a much more easier way to make sure people are socially distancing. Equally, the stuff we've said around commercial centres and looking for discounts with them, that could be an option, depending on whether your club can do things. And again, just think a little bit broader. So most people are within kind of a reasonable driving distance of more than one sailing club. So if your home sailing club isn't running RYA training, but you know that the club down the road is, speak to your host club, see if they have any links with the committee over there, and work out whether running a training course at a different club is something that they could support you with. Does anyone have any questions in the chat? Not looking likely at the moment. No. Okay. So yeah, just a couple more that came in earlier. If we get a lockdown and can no longer sail, how do we keep our members engaged? So obviously this, I imagine, is a big concern for a lot of people, especially a lot of our northern clubs. There's a lot of local lockdowns which are probably going to have an impact on what you guys can run. So I guess our recommendation for that would just be think about what worked well the first time round. So we're now in a kind of a better position in that we've already had a national lockdown. If you were part of your club last year, think about, you know, what did your social sec run? Did your committee do anything successfully, whether that was a quiz, socially distanced meetups in kind of parks, things like that. And just think, if you've got a group of social sailors who you really want to keep them engaged through a local lockdown, think about the social activities you can do with them. Can you do online Zoom training, start them working towards their level 1s, but by doing it kind of socially distanced in a park rather than having to travel to the sailing club? There's a lot of theory you can get through before you actually have to get in a boat, if that makes sense. And then I guess the kind of final sort of tip we would have for this kind of thing is integration can be an issue. And from what Birmingham was saying about mixing the group, that's something that they've successfully overcome. But I guess from the experience I've had, I know that some clubs and some years within clubs can be quite difficult in terms of getting social sailors coming to socials and race team members talking to the social sailors at socials. So some things that a few clubs have done that works quite well sometimes is a buddy scheme. So if you've got freshers joining the club, pair them up with old members and returning members. And then that's a good way to kind of give them a friendly face. It's someone they can ask any questions to. And, you know, can you get like online meetups or socially distanced meetups between buddies to really just try and make people feel included, even if you can't get out on the water every week. So that's, I guess, all the questions that we had submitted. Does anyone, I don't know if any of the people on the call have any thoughts on that kind of stuff around the current climate and what your clubs are doing around social sailing. Does anyone want to jump in with anything at all? Any particular things you've done well, challenges you're facing? No? Okay, stunned silence, wonderful. So, okay, we'll move on from that. And I guess just next steps. So thank you very much for coming to this. Obviously, by coming, you must have a vested interest in either continuing a good social sailing program that you've got or improving your social sailing offer. So the first thing we would say is just have a plan. So even if you've planned for freshers and the next few weeks, that kind of model that a lot of clubs lack is the long-term planning. So a lot of clubs are great at engaging new members, teaching them how to sail, but then how do you stop that winter drop off? And the things we would say to this is just get the whole committee involved. A lot of committees, I'm aware, have the kind of you do the social sailing, we do the racing mentality. That's definitely not the case. Get everyone involved, like Birmingham, try and mix it up as much as you can. And if you can get, for example, the race captain to come and do 1 or 2 sessions introducing a bit of team racing, or, you know, you can make sure that social sailors are feeling included at socials, things like that, is going to make a huge difference. And really just plan long term, like what do you want them to be doing this time next year? If they're freshers, ideally you want them rejoining the club and preferably coming to trials for you to select from your teams. So how are you going to get them from freshers that have never sailed up to that point? If you do have anyone interested in instructor courses and discounted courses, potentially we can get better discounts if we can organise a group course through BUSA. So do send us an email if you're interested or you know anyone that is. We had a group last year that had planned to do an instructor course in Easter. Obviously didn't happen because of COVID, but we're very keen to try and set that up again for this year. Regional collaboration, if you are interested in kind of bringing your social sailors together a bit more, we know that there's obviously challenges around going to an event and staying away overnight at the moment. So if you do have clubs local to you, other uni clubs, and you can kind of just, you know, go to them for the day or get them to come to you for the day, and you can still go home in the evenings, that could be a really positive thing to do this year. Use your regional Facebook groups and area chairs for that. I've already said send us an email about 7,000 times. So yeah, send us an email if you have any questions. And I guess finally, just any kind of visibility of this kind of stuff would be really good. So do tag us at BUSA Media in any kind of Instagram stories or Facebook posts that your club is sharing around your tasters and your social sailing stuff. It's always great to see what people are up to. And we will be looking kind of for more case studies going forward of clubs that are doing well in this area. And then just finally, we've got a couple more webinars coming up. Share this with other people on your club committees. We've got one on the 6th of October, which is actually next week, next Thursday. That one is all around boats. So we've got Keith from K-Sail coming. He's going to be talking about fixing boats, maintaining boats. You might be already thinking in your head, we've got no money to improve our boats, but the whole aim of this webinar is, my club's got no money, what can we do for the least possible money that's going to make our boats a bit better for team racing? And Keith's got loads of expertise in that. And there'll also be representatives from a couple of clubs talking about refitting boats and getting new boats as well. So if boats are a problem for you guys, come along to that one. And then finally later in October, when I guess it's all a bit dependent on the current situation, but we've got a webinar planned around team racing events, which hopefully will happen eventually, if not in the next few weeks. But yeah, thank you very, very much for coming. If you have any other questions, do kind of let us know. But yeah, thanks very much. And I hope the season goes okay for you and it's not too much of a challenge.